Good morning to all of you that have just logged on. You're very welcome. We have 18 attendees for the webinar this morning. I can see people are still logging on. So I'm just going to give it one more moment. I think we'll get to 11:04 and then I'll start. Hopefully everybody can hear me loud and clear. Even while we're waiting is to explain, you can see I've been using the chat box just to get everybody started. If you do have any difficulties in terms of sound, even put that in the chat box for me, but hopefully you're hearing. Good morning, Wayne. You're very welcome. It's a very sunny Hollywood, County Down. This morning as well. I think we're all enjoying the sunshine and feeling better for it. Okay, so it is 11:04, so I will get started because you have all allocated an hour this morning for this free webinar, which is about creating impassionate teams. So before I start, what I want to do is perhaps just go through a few housekeeping items on the agenda. One is those of you that had registered in advance have let you know that this webinar is recorded. Most of you are now are probably very familiar with Zoom. I use Zoom for meetings, but I'm using this platform, Crowdcast, now for webinars because it has some features that are really quite nice that Zoom don't have. I'm hoping all of this will work in terms of making the change from the webinars from Zoom to Crowdcast. So I'm hoping all of that will go smoothly. Just in terms of explaining Crowdcast, what you will see is that the chat box down the right-hand side. My sessions, unlike some other webinars, are very interactive. I will be asking questions, and the best way to respond to those is through the chat box, because there isn't, for a webinar, the sound isn't there for attendees. So I'd really appreciate it if you would do that. Second of all, I have created a very simple poll. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. And the question I've asked there is, have you started developing your return to work plan? So are you in the process of creating that? And it's a simple yes or no poll. It'd just be good to get a feel for what you've started or what you're thinking about at the moment. Some of you may not have developed that plan because you don't think it's appropriate to do so. Morning, Pauline, thank you for joining us. So you'll see there is polls at the bottom of the screen. And what you can do is tick yes or no, and that'll give me an indication of the number of people on the call that are either saying yes or no. So if you don't mind doing that, that would be great. Welcomed everybody. I think people are still joining. The numbers attending are increasing. We haven't got up to the 18 yet, but hopefully will before long. So there are some of you on the call that I will know reasonably well, and there are some of you that are new to attending some of my webinars. So again, you are very welcome. What I'm going to do is just start sharing my screen and give you a little bit of detail then about the webinar and about myself for those of you who don't know me. So this session is how to create an impassioned work team when we are easing out of lockdown. My name is Julie Allen of Julie Allen Consulting, and I have spent over 20 years now specialising in business improvement, primarily through strategy development and also through improving people practices to align with the strategies. What I specialise in now is improving psychological flexibility. I see some of the names signed up for this morning's webinar. You have joined today's session as a result of attending maybe a webinar from last week on improving psychological flexibility. So I am an ACT, which stands for Acceptance Commitment Training. I am a trainer and a matrix facilitator, certified by Dr. Kevin Polk in the States. I also specialise in creating psychologically safe workplaces, and that is some of what I'm going to be talking about this morning. And really linking very much with that around the leadership development and developing emotional intelligence, and licensed to provide the Thomas International Trait Emotional Intelligence Questionnaire, otherwise known as the TQ. All of those things can tie very nicely together. As I'm talking, maybe if you could even just use the chat box to share that you're able to see my screen okay now that the screen sharing's working. Just useful to know that everybody can see that. Great. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Okay. So the purpose of this morning's workshop is to help you, as you know, many of you are responsible for leading the plan, the way forward in terms of returning to whatever the new normal is. And the way to do that is to help you to understand what is required to create a psychologically safe environment that enables the team to believe it is safe to return to the workforce. Morning, Lorraine. So you will have a variety of people in different spaces now within your organisation, different spaces. What I mean is emotions. And I'm going to spend quite a little bit of time talking about that and the response to that. So we'll be spending a little bit of time thinking about the human behaviour in the workplace and some of those things that we might need to change and adapt moving forward. I'm not sure how many of you maybe attending this morning are familiar with the concept of psychological safety. Is this something most of you have heard of before? Yeah, okay, so certainly there may be a few of you on the call that have heard of psychological safety. So those of you that do know about it, what I'm just going to do is explain just what that concept is. And so psychological safety here, quote I have, is a climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. And in a team with high psychological safety, team members will feel that it is safe to take risks in front of their team members. They feel confident that no one will embarrass or punish them for admitting mistakes, asking questions, or offering new ideas. And so just even some of those explanations provide context to why are we talking about this today. And that is, you have people who work for you who at the moment will be feeling a variety of emotions, as I've said. They will be feeling fearful. They may be thinking of things that may be useful for you to know, but something's holding them back from telling you. Because the one thing that matters to everybody at the moment is job security and retaining their jobs. Therefore, people may not feel it's psychologically safe to have discussions with you about perhaps the state of their mental health, or it could be in terms of ideas and suggestions that people have in relation to the safe return to work, or the way in which the organisation should develop its services in the future. So psychological safety is really important in terms of leadership, that leaders know what they need to do to create those psychologically safe workplaces. Because if they're not psychologically safe, then there will be problems, but clearly there are benefits as a result of psychological safety. I think all of you will be aware of Google. Google and its successes. Where would we be without Google in today's world? It tells us everything. So Google had a research project called Google Aristotle. And Google Aristotle researched the characteristics of high-performing teams. And what I've listed here are the 5 characteristics that they came up with that are required in terms of high performing teams. So the first one at the very top of the list is psychological safety. And the way they define that is the team can take risks without feeling insecure or embarrassed. The other four are dependability, depending on each other to do high quality work on time, structure and clarity with defined goals, roles and execution of plans, meaning of work, that the work is personally meaningful to them and to everybody, and that the impact of the work, that everybody on the team believes that work matters. One of the things that they did find through this research was, of the 5 characteristics, psychological safety was by far the most important and underpinned the other 4. So if psychological safety in teams is one of the important characteristics, then what we do need to consider then is leaders who don't listen will eventually be surrounded by people who don't have anything to say. Because we, as leaders, we need to hear people's opinions. We need to listen to people's opinions without disregarding them. Because if we disregard people's opinions or their feelings, then that will create a lack of psychological safety. And that will, in the end, bring problems of which I'll describe as we're going through the session. So what are the benefits of psychological safety? I'm just going to go through a few slides here in terms of psychological safety, and then I'm going to get down into the interactive part of the session. So the benefits of psychological safety are, if people feel it is okay to talk, to be themselves, to discuss ideas and suggestions that they have, to raise concerns that they have, perhaps in terms of safety, then there is better communication and understanding about each other and where the organisation is at. It also creates conditions for learning, innovation and growth. Because if people are talking about those ideas and suggestions, then those can be explored and developed. But if they aren't, then they can't. There's a lost opportunity. Psychologically safe organisations do have improved levels of engagement. It does promote performance, because again, if you think about what is it that we all want from work, we all want to feel that we can make a difference and we are making a difference. And so people want to be proud of the job that they do and where they work. And when they feel that sense of belonging and part of the team, then great things can happen. So there'll be increased levels of initiative, more agile organisation, and it has been identified through research as being seen as the competitive advantage. Those of you that have attended workshops of mine probably over the last couple of years will have heard me continually talking about the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world that we live in. And I know that while we might have thought the world was volatile and complex and uncertain and ambiguous months ago, it's become much more now, because everything has changed in this pandemic that we are living in. So the one thing that we can say is, when we're living in a VUCA world, psychological safety is not a perk. It is an absolute essential to high performing. Because what is it we need in the VUCA world? If we think back over the last 10 weeks, one of the things that you have all needed and all achieved was to be agile. And that happened exceptionally quickly. Many of you deconstructed your workforces and reconstructed them again very quickly. And that was because need presented itself. The question really for us now is, how can we keep the need for agility to be at the forefront of our minds, that we're creating that within the organisation. And that's some of what we're going to be talking through. So one of the things in terms of, I suppose, the opposite of psychological safety is there are many organisations, and I think we've all been part of these, where silence is definitely heard. And what do I mean by that? And that is because we've been in organisations where we haven't wanted to say anything because we didn't want to be seen in a bad light. We haven't said anything because we didn't want to embarrass or upset those colleagues, perhaps even our boss. So our boss would be sorry, I've just thought I'd lost the screen there. Our boss is somebody that we don't want to upset because that's linking us back to the job security. So job security really being important to all of us. And so we choose not to say anything or upset our boss because of that. Sometimes we choose not to say anything because we simply think, well, it won't matter anyway. Who's going to listen? Nobody's going to do anything about it, so why bother? And also the silence comes from perhaps fear of our boss or our colleagues with some form of retaliation, being labelled as the negative one and the one that's always going to point out the problems or be the pessimist. And also fear of maybe damaging work relations. So we choose to say nothing, even when it perhaps comes to the physical safety in the workplace. People choose to say nothing because of the fear. And also, there are some of us that won't say anything and will remain silent because of a lack of confidence and self-protection. So, how many of you have stayed silent when you've seen something, you've had an idea, you've thought something should happen, and you decided to stay silent? Anybody willing to say that, yeah, silence is definitely something that I've done? No. Okay, well, those of you, yes, thank you. Some of you are now saying, yes, thank you. So we all at some point in our lives have stayed silent. We haven't voiced our opinions because of all of those fears. Some of you say no. If we remain silent, the question then is, well, how do you feel after that? And really, the feeling after that is regret. Regret, perhaps, that you didn't say anything. Knowing sometimes that, I might not be so popular, but I need to speak up. And that's great, because sometimes that means we're in an organisation where the culture is being created where it's safe to do so. Where it's not safe to do so, then problems go unreported, improvement opportunities are missed, tragic failures occur, and there's a loss of competitive advantage. There are many very large corporate organisations across the world where the loss of the competitive advantage has been felt because of a lack of a psychologically safe environment. A couple maybe just to highlight at this point is, everybody remembers Dieselgate and the Volkswagen issue there. How did that come about? That came about through targets being set at a very high level to increase sales. Diesel was a problem in terms of it's in the environment. And so it didn't matter what happened. Cars needed to be developed to increase the sales. Therefore, they developed a computer system that would enable the car to pass the test when the car was tested to see if it met the regulations. When the research into how this all happened came to light, really it was because there were about 40 people involved. But they feared for their jobs, so they did what they were told, and they continued with what was a farce in terms of an environmentally friendly car. So the impact of silence can be huge, and in the context that we're living in today, We all want our organisations to continue to be successful. We want to continue to employ the people that we are employing. And so we need to get everybody involved in that, because it's quite often those people on the ground, on the front line, that have the ideas and can say what can happen. So the question is, are we talking to those people and are we listening to them? So if we think about, even at the moment, the environment that we exist within, what's changed with the world of work? Well, one of the things is the psychological contract. So we've got the physical contract at work, and we've got the psychological contract. It's the way we go about things in the organisation, the promises that we make to individuals when they come to work for us. And one of the things in terms of the psychological contract that's broken down is many organisations said in the past, home working doesn't work for us. So a lot of the things that we believe didn't work now work today. Not only has the psychological contract changed in terms of, the home working, the work itself has changed. So there are people that have perhaps had to be very flexible. You may yourself have taken on other people's responsibilities. The way in which we do the work has changed. Many of you are sitting in front of a screen all day. So the work itself has changed in terms of perhaps conducting Zoom meetings, team meetings. The way you do things is now very different. The workplace itself is different because it's virtual for some, or parts of the organisation are virtual. Or the workplace itself, for those of you that are at work, has changed in terms of the hygiene factors, the social distancing. All of those things have had a huge impact. There are increased demands at home. And I think one of the things that has changed over the last 10 weeks is the importance of home and the importance of family. I don't know when that just reminds me of the Liberty IT. They have a campaign that they started at the beginning of lockdown, and it's family first, work second. So there are increased demands on people at home because people are working at home with children at home and school homing at the same time. The psychological well-being of your employees has changed. And that has changed because everybody has been on high alert. High alert in terms of the virus, nobody wanting to get the virus. High alert in terms of being able to keep their job. There may be some of your colleagues who have been furloughed, so they will have fears about perhaps what's going to happen next. And this is all impacting on the mental well-being of the individuals, because they may not have developed the skills to be able to cope with all of this. So this is a little script, handwritten note that I got on social media recently, which really, I think, does emphasize what has changed. So, the normal wasn't working before. There are many benefits to what has changed. So, I can even say myself, I'm not traveling. So I'm up early in the morning and I'm out walking. And I have to say that's probably one of the things of the changes that I really don't want to let go now. And I'm sure there are changes that have occurred for your team that people don't really want to let go of. And that's important in terms of what we're going to be going through. So even in terms of a psychologically safe environment, we need to inspire people to bring their best selves to work. Now that's difficult if everybody's on high alert, because when we're on high alert, what it means is our brain can't always think logically, because it's busy looking for the danger all around us instead of being able to look forward and to be proactive. So to bring our best selves to work, there are 4 human needs. I could also refer back to, if anybody knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we need our competence, that is the ability to learn, to grow, to operate in a challenging environment and to be challenged. Autonomy is people need to be able to shape their own experiences. They need to have a sense of belonging. They need to feel part of the team. And that's something I think that all of you have probably worked exceptionally hard at over the last couple of weeks, creating that sense of belonging when you're all not in the same building and under one roof. And the sense of purpose is everybody needs a sense of purpose. And so as leaders, the question is, well, how do we go about creating all of that? Earlier, the definition of psychological safety, the quote was from Amy Edmondson in terms of the definition. And here, in terms of leading psychologically safe teams, Amy suggests that there are three important things that leaders need to consider. And the first one is to frame work as a learning problem. So, if we think about the situation that we're in at the moment, is to frame it as a learning problem. So this is a new environment. We're all getting to grips with this. Is to frame your questions around this is a learning environment rather than a challenge that perhaps when people hear challenge, they also hear in their minds failure. And for a leader, it's to be curious. To be curious is to ask the questions, to listen to others, and that is to truly listen to what people are saying without disregarding their opinions because of maybe the level that they're at, some prejudices that we might have, but is to really ask those questions and to be really a good listener. And then is to acknowledge our own fallibility. So that might be saying to the team things like, I don't have all the answers. We've never been here before, but together we can make this work. If we're going to create psychologically safe teams and we want people to raise concerns, then they will never raise concerns unless we are role modeling as leaders. And that is being able to admit the mistakes that we've made rather than to maybe just move on and pretend that those didn't happen. So those are three things to consider. Now, moving into the interactive part of the session and considering, well, what are the things that we need to do to create those impassioned teams, create psychological flexibility, developing that plan to ease out of lockdown. What I'd like to do is explain this matrix very briefly because I'm going to move on to a second matrix, and that's where I'd like to spend the time. So this is the ACT matrix created by Dr. Kevin Polk. It has its roots in behavioural science, or it is a behavioural tool. And really there are four areas of the matrix. At the very top of the matrix, what we see here is the five senses experience. This is the external world. What I see, what I hear, what I can touch, what I can taste, and what I can smell. And then on the other hand, we have the internal experiences. That's the internal world that we live in. And for many of us, we can go through the day spending a huge proportion of our time in the internal world. And what we need to do is to notice we're in the internal world and to remind ourselves to come back, pull back, and come back into the external world. On the other hand, what we've got there are the away and towards, and those are what I call moves. We either move away or we move towards. So very briefly, what I'd like to do is explain this as an individual so you understand your individual employees, and then we're going to look at the team, moving that up, and that's where we're going to spend our time. So when we think about even ourselves as individuals, because we ourselves are human beings, and we say, well, who's important to me and what's important to me? What really matters to me? Who really matters? Well, in the bottom left of the matrix, we'd say things like friends, family, work colleagues, pets even, for example. I've already talked about some of what really matters to people at the moment. So I think health has jumped up the scale in terms of what matters. I want to be physically and mentally well, because I don't want to be sick. I can't afford not to be working. So job security may be another one that's vitally important. So if you just considering for a moment yourself, what really matters to you? What are the things that are important in your life? And then on the bottom left of the matrix is an individual. If you think about what unwanted stuff shows up inside you that moves you away from those things that are important. So at the moment, the one thing that's been popping up for everybody is fear. The amygdala, a part of the brain designed to experience the emotion of fear, when the amygdala is activated, really that will put us on high alert. So the feelings of fear, for some, the feeling of sadness that we're no longer together as a team, sadness of some of the things that we're missing, frustration about the situation and when lockdown might be released, isolation might be something that we're feeling, not being part of the team, feeling of stress and anxiety, because many people are experiencing some kind of trauma, and the concern is after this that there will be more people with post-traumatic stress disorder, because people will have spent perhaps 10 weeks in a state of trauma because the amygdala has been activated over that period of time. So if we move up to the top left of the matrix, the question there really is, well, when the unwanted stuff shows up, what do you do to get rid of it? And we've all been doing things at the moment. So the feeling of boredom, we in terms of boredom, we might be eating more. We might be watching more television. If we're fearful or if we're frustrated about the situation, we might be watching more news so that we know what will be happening in the future. But that may result in creating more fear. So we go from the top left of the matrix back down into the bottom left of the matrix, and we can just move very easily in between the two. The question then is, well, for example, what kind of things as an individual could I do to move me towards who and what's important? Well, if health really matters to me, it's getting your daily exercise. It's eating nutritious meals. The point of the matrix in the middle is noticing when I'm in the internal world and the external world, and noticing when I'm making an away or a towards move. So what would be better for me at this moment in time? If I'm noticing what I'm feeling, what would be better for me to do? So it's a very simple run round of the ACT matrix, because what I'd like to do is to start working on the team. And this is the bit that I would like now to be interactive and to get everybody involved. So the pro-social matrix, if we think about creating psychologically safe workplaces, when we're easing out of lockdown and developing that plan, if we consider the team here, what we have to ask is, what really matters to the team, do you think, in terms of that return to work? So this is the point where I'd like you to use the chat box to reflect the answers to the questions that I'm asking. I will populate the matrix so that you can see how this works. So what do you think matters to people in your workplaces at the moment when they think about that return to work? What matters? What matters about what's important to the team? Okay, thank you. Safety, Lorraine. Yeah, so safety is something that's hugely important. And hiding. Anything else that you think that people will think? What do you think your team members really think is important at the moment? Okay, so yeah, so safety, security, so job security, income, safe job, clear communication, being connected. Yeah, so fear of public transport, Rain, I'm going to hold that one because I'm going to populate that somewhere else. So what's important to people, I suppose, here is to your team members is that they can travel safely to work. Who's cooking and looking after the kids? So what's important is childcare and food. Okay, great. And impact of the new ways of working. So how will this impact on me? Um, so yeah, and if you think about, there's some things that I've been talking about this morning that matter is people need a sense of purpose. There are some other things that I think team members will need, and that is to trust colleagues in the return to work. Trust colleagues that they will adhere to whatever safety and hygiene regulations are introduced. Um, Information sharing, so that they have the information that they need. They don't come back to work in the absence of information, but there's a free flow of information around some of those things that you've talked about. So what changes will be made? How will those impact on me? Where contracts are ending, and potential new employment. So it's information sharing and communication of what's changed. Also, that I think, considering what I've talked about with the ACT matrix, is that people feel supported. They feel supported, perhaps in terms of their physical and mental health, supported even financially in terms of perhaps guidance. And also, if you think about you as leaders, even within the team, because you are part of the team, one of the things that your colleagues might want, and you might want also, is to be open-minded. Open to new ways of doing things, open to it's possible to do things in a different way. It might also be about being inclusive, because one of the things I've heard from some of you is, there's perhaps two elements of the workforce at the moment, those that are at work and those that have been furloughed, and perhaps both of those teams don't feel that they are inclusive. So that might be something that people might want as well. So yeah, being connected, we've got sense of belonging. And one of the things that I've said is curious. We need people to be curious, to be asking questions, not to disregard and shoot down ideas. And we need challenge. People want to be in challenging jobs, that gives them that sense of purpose. So if we say, okay, here are some things, just even to get us started, because in this period of time, all we can do in an hour is give you a flavour for this, is over here now in the bottom left, the question is, what do you think is showing up inside team members at the moment when they think about returning to work? What would be showing up inside team members? In other words, what's showing up in the internal world? That's thoughts and emotions. One that I've been talking about is fear. Fear will be showing up. Isolation will be showing up. There may be frustration, perhaps frustration that I can't come back soon enough, uncertainty. Uncertainty. What else do you think might be showing up? For some, it could be dread. I can't face the thought of returning to work because I don't believe people are going to do as they're told. That dread may also cause some anxiety. It may be that some are feeling a little fatigued. If you think about, for those of you that have those two teams, some being furloughed, some working, working for 10 weeks at home, some just may be exhausted because we were in the alert mode. The amygdala had been activated, and we've been pushing ourselves to come up with new ideas and solutions, and that can cause some tiredness. It could be confusion. A lot of confusion at the moment around perhaps the guidance and what's been suggested and what the research says. Will there be more? Yeah. So what are the expectations? And Some will be absolutely pleased to be back at work. So when you talked about the fear of the public transport system, so yeah, fear, and some may be feeling a lack of confidence because of so much has changed in a short period of time. Some may also feel a little stressed when we start talking about return to work. Or it could be that some people are feeling depressed. So lots of emotions that your team members are experiencing and will, because it's everybody's talking about it. When will it be happening? When are we likely to get back to normal? So there are things that go on internally. So yeah, why return? I like it at home. So it's fine the way it is. Why do we need to bother? Can we not wait and see? And that would be perhaps again fear holding people back. If you're going to create the psychologically safe environment, then leaders need to be understanding human behavior and understanding these emotions as real emotions that will impact on people's decisions. So if I move into the top left of the matrix, just as we had talked about with the ACT matrix, the question here is, what do you think team members might do that would help them to get rid of the feelings that we have here in the bottom left? So it might be when you're talking to people perhaps about how they feel, they choose not to talk. Or you'd hear them saying, I'm fine. Because they want you to think they're fine. Because if they're fine in their world, then that will create job security. Because if I say I'm not fine, then there's a possibility that I might lose my job. We might hear people making excuses. So if you remember, these are things in the external world. These are what I would see or hear people doing. We might have people ranting about your plans because they won't work, because they don't want them to work because of the fear. People might email instead of having conversations, because that's a much better way of them coping with their stress and their fear. They can take their time over doing that. Some people will be less productive because of the stress, depression, dread, or anxiety. There may be conflict within teams, and in the safe return to work, that is something that you ultimately want to avoid. You don't want people to feel that if there is conflict, then we'll go back into the anxiety stage, and then people will say they're not fit to return to work. So we could also on this side see people not following guidelines. Because it doesn't matter. Why worry? Or it's just simply because they've made the mistake and they just can't keep the focus. Any other ideas that you think, any other behaviors that you can see your employees displaying when you start to talk about that safe return to work? Nope. Okay, so what you want to do is to notice what team members are doing, how they're behaving, what they're saying, and what they're doing, and to be thinking about the reasons for that. Withdrawal is something that we might see, opting out of conversations or social activities, because they just don't want to get involved. So the point in terms of your plan now is creating a psychologically safe workplace, work plan. How can we do that? So the question here in the top right is, what can team members do to move them towards this shared purpose and what really matters to the team? So, any thoughts about what you think team members could do? So, team members includes those people within the team, and also yourselves as leaders. What are some of the things that you could do that would move you towards safety, hygiene, information sharing? So I'm going to start us off by start conversations in groups and individuals. If you want to create psychologically safe environment, you want to know what people think, you want to avoid all the pitfalls of the withdrawal or the ranting, people saying your plan won't work. It's about starting to have open conversations with individuals. The question around, I don't have all the answers, I want to work with this together as a team. What do you think we should be doing? So you can ask that in groups, you can ask that in individuals, you can share your plan with groups and also with individuals. And it is also maybe individual check-ins. Because I think, those people particularly who have been furloughed kind of very much feel isolated now. So perhaps even they're still your employees, they're on furlough, but maybe even just giving them a call to check in with them and see how they are could help. So ask for ideas and suggestions. And it could be project teams. So it could be, for example, you allocate somebody as a project team to deal with the hygiene factors, or you get somebody developed a team together who are going to be responsible for the communication strategy. So you need a communication strategy that is planning the plan, it's implementing the plan, and then it is about being at work. So the communication strategy around your posters and the reminders and the signage about social distancing and planning all of that. It is about talking to people about the PPE. What PPE do we need in the workplace? And going about sourcing that as well. It's maybe talking to the team about rotation. Because one of the things, if we want people to feel safe in terms of the physical environment and the virus and the hygiene, then the rotation is about, if we bring people back into work, that we're not bringing everybody back into work. One person comes into work with a virus and then everybody's self-isolating again for 14 days. So it's about being able to rotate the workforce so that you're not having to go into shutdown again, and making sure that the systems are in place to do that. So it would be about reviewing sickness procedures and benefits if you haven't already done so. Benefits reminds me also in terms of the safety, the high alert, with Lorraine on the webinar this morning as well from Corporate Benefits. And one of the products that Lorraine would recommend is the Vitality Healthcare. There may be some of you on the webinar this morning who use the Vitality Healthcare, and it is about reminding people of healthcare benefits. So it might be reminding people that they have access to some counselling. It might also be reminding them of, so Vitality have offered the Peloton app for free to their members, I think to August time, where there's yoga and some meditation. So it's about advice to the team on health and safety. And if you've got Vitality, then it's maybe about sharing some of their articles that they are providing. It's also about thanking people. We've all done hard jobs in hard times, And I think, everybody wants to be thanked. And sometimes when we're busy fighting the battle, we can forget to do that. So it could also then be about establishing problem solving groups. And if we think about psychological safety and some of what I mentioned earlier, then it's about you as leaders being available for conversations and available to really listen. I'm running out of space to add in here. A few more ideas. Anybody else like to share any thoughts in terms of the plan to return to work and considering what could team members do to create an environment where people feel it's safe to return to work? Any suggestions? Some of the other things would be about, even the risk assessments. It's about asking the staff what kind of structure needs to be put in place for them to raise concerns, because people will want to know that there is a system to raise concerns about people who aren't adhering to the guidance that you've set in the workplace, that they feel that it is okay to do that and that there's a system to do that safely, and how people will be dealt with should they not adhere to the guidelines that you set. The curiosity factor for you as leaders is to be the don't knower. Well, I don't know, we haven't been here before. It is to keep asking questions rather than the solutions. And the key aspect of leadership here is listening to people, having conversations, because then you'll know whether people are ready to return to work or whether they aren't. And the conditions then that they need to be able to introduce the conditions they need in the workplace for that to be felt, for the psychological safety to be felt. So what I've done is I've talked you through what we talk about as two loops. The first loop, the ACT matrix. Me as an individual, what's important to me, what's showing up, how I respond to those emotions internally, and what I could do to move towards what's important to me in life. Here, what we've done in the second loop, the pro-social matrix, is we've moved that up a level. And so this is now we as the team, what's important to the team, and considering actions. What is it that the team need to do to move closer towards that? And that is not doing it all ourselves as leaders, because that's where it is likely to fail. It's about getting people involved, keeping them connected, and having those conversations. So in terms of practicing those skills in psychological safety, what I'd encourage you to do over the next couple of weeks is to practice noticing what's important to the team, is asking them either in groups or individuals through those virtual calls that you're having about what's important to them as an individual when they would return to work. What could be really helpful is, if you've got the space, is get that matrix on your wall. Take a page for each quadrant of the matrix and really map it out for yourself so you can see what's important and what people are experiencing. So what internal experiences are showing up in the team and that move them away from what's important? What do team members do that move them away from the unwanted internal experiences? Perhaps even try the pro-social matrix with your team and ask them those questions. And then is to ask the team, well, what actions and what behaviours do we need that would help team members move towards the what's important and what really matters in the bottom right? They'll have lots of ideas and lots of suggestions, but the silence will only be broken if we create the environment to do so. just coming to the end of the session and to questions. What I want to do first of all is to thank you for registering. Thank you for joining the session and spending the last hour with us. I hope it was useful. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. That's where we'll be sharing any future webinars. And if you feel that you would like to teach your team, your leaders, to improve their psychological flexibility, which is the ACT matrix, and to help leaders develop psychological safety within their teams, then please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. But what I'd like to do is to come back to yourselves and ask you for, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, and any thoughts about how you've felt about the hour's webinar. If you could use the chat box just for any questions that you might have. Any questions? Did the ACT matrix, or sorry, not the ACT matrix, but the pro-social matrix, did you find that a useful tool just to work your way around what people are experiencing, how we might move in a different direction? Okay, so I think we've gone quiet. So it is 12 o'clock. Thank you for attending. Thank you for participating and for getting involved in the chat in relation to those questions. I wish you all the very best with your plans, and please continue to stay safe and to stay well. Thank you.